Well, I think that if I could just sort of comment on that, because in the nature of a sort of political question as well, which is that the investigation that's going on now at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration focuses on Toyota, and Toyota has initiated some major, huge recalls dealing with this. And they've denied that there's an electronics issue, and a lot of people don't believe them. They don't think the floor mat is the cause of their runaway cars. And there are a lot of examples where people have had these runaway vehicles in the so-called floor mat recalled vehicles, the 5 million vehicles, where the floor mat wasn't in the vehicle. And so it's raised the issue. Now, there certainly are other sudden acceleration cases that have come forward, and this is by no means the only one. It's just the one that's on the docket right now.
In the case in South Lake, Texas, it was an avalanche that actually, hit a fence and then flipped and landed in a pond, and all 4 occupants were killed. Actually, they found the floor mat in the trunk. Right,
that's right. So there are a number of these vehicles where the floor mat was not even in the vehicle, and including the one of our driver on the far end. You may want to talk to him after the press conference. So we're focusing on Toyota because Toyota has denied that there's a electronic issue, and we think that this needs to be explored further in several ways. One, in terms of the investigation that's being conducted by NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and secondly, and they've had some problems with it, and they have not got a lot of electronic expertise. And I know that they have hired some, but we felt that this was something that needed further elaboration for the public, and a lot of media people and the public do not understand the electronic issues. We thought that today we might help to demystify some of those, and then secondly, of course, for the design of a future standard.
I'd also like to add that over the years, many manufacturers have had issues with unintended acceleration. Representative Hochbruckner in the early 1990s had a bill that would have required the National Academy of Sciences to look into it and to come up with recommendations for safety standards. But what has happened with Toyota is they were a manufacturer that was a leader in electronic controls, particularly electronic throttle controls, and it appeared in their vehicles in significant numbers before it appeared in other vehicles. So that Toyota was not only the leader in the technology, but the bad effects that come from it unless you have adequate countermeasures.
I'd like to throw in a point here.
Okay, Dr. Anderson.
I'd like to throw in something from my own experience. I have a website, and since about 2002, I've been having people contacting me from all over the world about their experiences with sudden acceleration. I had somebody in 2003 contacting me from Malaysia who had a vehicle, a brand new vehicle that was 3 days old, and it ran away in a tropical rainstorm. And 5 days later, when there was another tropical rainstorm, it ran away again. And so he managed eventually, after a lot of hassle, to get it changed for a vehicle which had a manual throttle and which didn't have cruise control. Almost at the same time, I had somebody in England who contacted me because he'd got a problem with a Vauxhall Vectra that had an electronic throttle, and that reached a speed of 122 miles an hour, at which stage he was spotted by the police, and 3 weeks later he got a summons. I wrote a detailed report which covered 5 incidents that had happened. I think it was 5 or 4. In the previous week it was a hire car, and the result of that was that the prosecution was dropped. In France, about 2 years ago, there was a case with a Toyota RAV4, which went into a toll barrier and killed somebody. There have been 40, I think, incidents of Renault vehicles in France, some of them accelerating, some of them crashing into toll barriers, and so on. I've had people contacting me from New Zealand. There was a case in Australia recently, which was a rather interesting one, because the man had a vehicle that was running about 50 miles an hour. He couldn't get the cruise control disengaged.
So there have been cases all over the world, and many in the United States as well.
Yes.
And I think the point that Anthony was leading up to was that it's the internet is responsible for some of Toyota's current woes is because people get to learn that they're not alone. They aren't the only one who is having this problem.
I think in the past the dealerships have filtered things.
You go to the
possibly-
dealer and the dealer says no problem, and that's the end of it.
Well, they show you no fault code, so there can't be a fault, which is an illusion. I'd just like to back up something that Mr. Ditlow said about this, getting the proprietary stuff out of this. If you go to other industries that are very safety conscious, like aviation or rail or whatever, nuclear, there is an obligation. Serious incidents are independently investigated, and the knowledge is shared amongst the manufacturers. And this is just doesn't happen, as far as I know, in the automotive industry.
Is it shared with the public?
Yes.
It is, with the public as well as
Yeah.
among manufacturers.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll use that piece of information. Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming. Oh, sorry, there is one. Oh, I'm sorry, missed it. Back here, in the back of the room.
That's okay. I can ask about it.
No, well, here's the mic. Sorry.
Laura Iyama, freelance. I'm curious about, just if someone can explicitly state then, we've had these reports now where there have been runaway cars, and yet supposedly when you look at the black box, there is no indication that they hit the brakes. So can someone basically say then that the black box could be an error, the person could have hit the brakes, and we just would not have a record of that? And secondly, you're talking about installing a backup system, something else that is independent of the current electronic system. Is there anyone who has some sort of a backup system like that in place? And if not, how much would it actually cost? How much will it add to the cost of the car to have to redesign, to put something in that's independent?
Who wants to handle the first question?
Well, yes, what was the first question again?
If you hit, if the black box could mislead
black
you.
box, that's right. Yes, yes, of course it can. Yes, I hope I made that clear in my slide, that because the black box relies on the very same electronics that is doing the malfunctioning, then you can't rely on the data from it. And also, as Brian points out, if nobody thought that a certain electronic malfunction could occur, then they didn't look for it, and so the data never got trapped in the black box. And the second one was, we all three of us believe, from what we know about the auto industry and the rest of the world, that it would be quite, the backup systems, or fail-safe systems, whatever, could be added to a modern automobile at a very reasonable cost.
Like?
I'm not going to give a cost because we need to sit down with the automotive people and work it out.
Right, okay.
But
you're talking like less than $20, less than $10, something in that range.
Probably, yeah. I wouldn't like to be drawn. I personally...
No. I'm not asking you to give an exact number, but we're trying to get proportionality here.
Yeah.
Yes.
As a cost benefit for the lives saved,
right.
I think you'll find that it'll be hugely
beneficial.
I think it would be a lot less cost per vehicle than a recall.
Does that answer your questions? Okay. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Could the person identify themselves, please?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, you can hear me. We can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Eric Everts with Consumer Reports. Question for Dr. Armstrong. You mentioned working with the IEEE on standards. I've talked to some automakers who say that they are working on IEEE. What are they not doing? Do you know what they are doing and what they're not doing that they need to be?
I'm not privy to all that goes on at the IEEE. It's a huge organisation. I'm not aware of any of the kind of safety standards that we would be talking about, or we did talk about earlier, that are being worked on. There is a draft. It's an ISO standard, International Safety Organization standard, ISO 26262. This is the automotive industry's answer to the standard I mentioned earlier on, the international standard, which was published in 2000. So after 10 years, 10 years after the first document was published, the automotive industry just has its first draft of what they would maybe think they might like to use in the future, perhaps one day.
Do we have another question from the phone? That's it. Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate your coming.